Picture this. You are looking at a massive telecommunications titan.
Right.
We're talking about a company that is rapidly evolving from just a traditional infrastructure player into, well, a fully fledged digital techa.
Which is a huge transition.
Exactly. And to understand the sheer scale of the operation we are analyzing today, you really have to visualize this footprint. It is sprawling across multiple South American countries, with a presence in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, they are everywhere.
They're servicing over 30 million customers. They are employing a workforce of over 21,000 people, and they are sitting on a staggering 78,000 kilometers of fiber optic network.
It's hard to even picture that.
Right. That is literally enough fiber to wrap around the Earth almost twice.
It is a phenomenal operational footprint, and that physical scale is exactly why the 2022 operating environment they had to navigate is such a critical case study for us.
Yeah, 2022 is rough.
It really was. If you want a masterclass in steering a highly capital-intensive corporate behemoth through extreme economic turbulence, 2022 is the year to look at.
No doubt.
To ground you in the reality of what this company was actually facing, we have to establish the macro context. They were operating in a local market that experienced an inflation rate of 94.8%.
Wow.
And simultaneously, the local currency suffered a severe depreciation of 72.5%.
I always try to wrap my head around those numbers from a purely practical standpoint. Like, how do you even begin to forecast a corporate budget when the price of basic supplies, let alone, specialized telecommunications equipment, effectively doubles over the course of 12 months?
You don't. You essentially throw the traditional playbook out the window.
Right.
You are running a business on economic quicksand. And that brings us to the financial panorama for the year, which paints a very complex picture. On the surface, their top line actually looks incredible. They brought in revenues of $729,182 million.
Which sounds like an absolute home run on paper. But with 94.8% inflation, I imagine that top-line number is doing a lot of heavy lifting to, well, mask the reality.
It is entirely distorted. When you strip away the inflationary impact and look at those sales in real terms, revenue actually dropped 11.5% year over year.
Ouch.
Yeah, the purchasing power of their consumer base was just severely squeezed. However, the management team pulled off something remarkable on the operational side.
Oh.
Despite the revenue dropped in real terms, they achieved an EBIT of $200,380 million. They held on to a very solid 27.5% operating margin.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this is the big reveal and is the entire mission of our deep dive today. We have a company with highly disciplined operations.
Right.
They're holding a 27.5% margin. They are generating massive top-line revenue. But despite all of that operational discipline, they posted a net loss of $205,640 million.
Massive loss.
Exactly. So we need to figure out how a company with such robust day-to-day operations ends up reporting a loss that big, and more importantly, how they are innovating to survive conditions that would instantly bankrupt a less agile business.
To understand that massive net loss, we have to systematically break down the three main challenges they faced that year.
Let's do it.
The first major hurdle is the inflation pricing squeeze we just touched on.
Let's dive into that squeeze, because the immediate question that comes to mind is, why not just raise prices to match inflation? I mean, if your costs are going up 94%, why not hike the customer's monthly internet bill by the same amount?
Because of the elasticity of demand.
Okay.
If you raise the price of someone's mobile phone or home broadband plan by nearly 100% in a single year, you trigger massive customer churn. People simply cannot afford it.
So they just leave.
Exactly. They will either downgrade their plans or cancel altogether. The company had to eat the difference between their rapidly rising operational costs and what the local consumer could actually bear.
Which hurts.
That dynamic is exactly what eroded their real revenue by 11.5%.
So they are stuck between a rock and a hard place here. They can't price gouge the consumer, but they still have to maintain 78,000 kilometers of fiber. How did they actually pivot?
They executed a two-pronged defense. First, they aggressively hunted for operational efficiencies. They cut excess overhead wherever possible just to protect that 27.5% margin.
Makes sense.
But the strategic pivot is what is truly fascinating. They realized they couldn't rely solely on consumer mobile plans to drive growth in a distressed economy.
Yeah, the consumer's tapped out.
Exactly. So they shifted their focus toward high-margin B2B digital solutions. They started selling complex, high-value technology infrastructure directly to other enterprises. We will touch on those specific solutions a bit later.
That makes total strategic sense. You move away from the tapped-out consumer and sell to businesses that still have capital to deploy. But look, A pivot to B2B doesn't explain a 205,640 million Woman hole in the balance sheet. Where did that specific loss come from?
That brings us to challenge number 2. This was a massive accounting hit.
Okay.
Specifically, they recorded a 243,900 million non-cash goodwill impairment.
A goodwill impairment.
Yes. Because of the extreme macroeconomic volatility and a significant drop in the company's stock price, accounting standards forced them to write down the value of their past acquisitions on their balance sheet.
So, to put it in everyday terms, it is kind of like buying a house for a certain price, and a few years later, the real estate market in your neighborhood just tanks.
Exactly.
Your accountant comes in and says, hey, you have to declare a massive loss on the value of this house. Even though you still live there, the roof doesn't leak, and you haven't actually spent any new money.
That captures the mechanics perfectly. It is a paper loss, not a cash burn.
Got it.
Their day-to-day ability to generate cash and pay their staff wasn't impacted by this specific accounting entry at all, but it serves as a stark, quantified reminder of country risk. When the macro environment deteriorates, the perceived long-term value of your assets takes a severe hit, regardless of how well your network is actually functioning today.
Which leads us right into the third major challenge. And honestly, this one feels like it has the potential to be the most disruptive of them all. Regulatory limbo.
Yes, the regulatory landscape was brutal.
The sources highlight a specific government decree, DNU 69020. The government basically attempted to classify the company's internet and telecom services as a public service.
And the critical implication of being labeled a public service is that it comes with government-mandated price controls.
Oh, wow.
For a company that requires massive, continuous CapEx just to keep their networks modern and functional, arbitrary price caps are incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
You cannot plan multi-year fiber optic rollouts if a regulatory body can suddenly dictate what you are allowed to charge for access.
It is the ultimate regulatory sword of Damocles hanging over their operations. How do you plan for the future when the rules of the game might change overnight?
You fight it. And impartially speaking, the company took aggressive legal action. They secured a legal injunction in the courts to suspend the application of DNU 690/20, winning temporary relief.
So they dodged the bullet for now.
For now. However, that injunction doesn't erase the underlying political intent. The uncertainty remains a latent threat to their pricing strategy, forcing them to operate with a level of financial agility that most companies never have to develop.
Let's transition into that agility. Because despite these three massive hurdles, the inflation squeeze, the goodwill impairment, and the regulatory threats, they pulled off some incredibly creative maneuvers during the year.
They absolutely did.
The first key event that jumped out to me was their dividend distribution. I was looking at the financials, and I saw they distributed $45,258 million to their shareholders. How on earth do you manage a payout like that in an environment with severe capital controls and a rapidly depreciating local currency?
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of this distribution. In a market with severe restrictions on accessing foreign exchange, you cannot simply convert local currency into foreign cash and wire it to international shareholders.
Right, the government would just block it.
It would be blocked or penalized heavily. So they bypassed the currency trap entirely by distributing the dividends in kind. They used sovereign global bonds.
Wait, break that down for me. They basically handed their shareholders government debt instead of cash.
Exactly. The company held these sovereign bonds on their balance sheet, which are instruments amortizable in foreign currency. Instead of trying to liquidate them in a restricted market, they physically distributed the bond instruments to the shareholders as the dividend payment.
Here is where it gets really interesting. That is solving a complex liquidity bottleneck with pure structural engineering.
Yes.
You are a shareholder who wants value. Here is a sovereign bond. It completely circumvents the local currency restrictions while still delivering tangible value to the investors. It is a masterstroke of financial survival.
And that survival instinct extends to how they fund their actual infrastructure, too.
Oh.
The second key event was their strategic network financing. During this intense local economic crisis, they successfully secured a loan of up to $184.5 million from the IFC.
That is huge.
Alongside that, they issued new corporate bonds for $98 million and an additional $2,348 million in the local market.
Okay, I need to pause on that. Securing international capital when your local market is experiencing 94.8% inflation seems incredibly counterintuitive.
On the surface, yes.
Why would an entity like the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank Group, lend that kind of money into such a volatile environment?
Because lenders at that level look past the immediate macroeconomic noise and focus on the underlying asset. The IFC's mandate is to drive development, and in the modern era, digital connectivity is foundational to economic development.
Sure.
They aren't lending based on a quarterly earnings report. They are lending against 78,000 kilometers of hard fiber optic cable. They recognize that regardless of inflation or currency swings, the country fundamentally needs that digital bedrock to function. It is a massive vote of confidence in the company's infrastructure assets.
It is proof that hard assets still hold weight, even when the paper economy is struggling. And they aren't just defending their existing territory either. They are actively expanding.
Yes, their M&A strategy didn't stop.
Exactly. The third key event we need to touch on is their M&A activity. I noticed they bought out a regional internet provider named NYSSA.
Yes, they acquired 100% of NYSSA for a base price of $3.4 million.
Which isn't a massive number.
While the purchase price is relatively small compared to their overall revenues, the strategic implication is huge.
It proves that consolidation never sleeps. A localized crisis actually creates a buyer's market for a giant with solid cash flow.
Yeah.
They can swoop in, acquire strategic regional players, and instantly expand their broadband footprint in key provinces without having to lay new fiber from scratch.
Now, alongside the financial engineering and strategic acquisitions, we really have to evaluate their ESG highlights: environmental, social, and governance.
Right.
These factors are no longer just PR exercises. They are materially critical to how institutional investors assess long-term viability.
Very true.
Let's start with the environmental pillar. The company has a massive physical footprint.
You cannot operate a network of that scale without plugging it in. The energy demands must be astronomical.
They are. The report highlights their 160,781 Scope 2 emissions. For context, Scope 2 emissions refer to the indirect greenhouse gas emissions associated with the purchase of electricity, steam, heat, or cooling.
So the power grid.
Exactly. To mitigate this, the company planted 270 trees and contributed an additional 6,500 more to local ecosystems. This initiative helped absorb over 7,000 tons of CO2 equivalent, offsetting a portion of those Scope 2 emissions.
It is a solid initiative, but we have to be realistic about the limitations here. Planting trees is great, but it feels like a drop in the bucket compared to the power required to run thousands of data centers and cell towers 24/7.
You are hitting on the core limitation for any tech co. They have a strong future commitment to deploying IoT Internet of Things solutions to optimize their own environmental management and help their B2B clients do the same.
That helps.
But fundamentally, they are captive to the national energy grid. No matter how efficient their servers get or how many trees they plant, their ability to drastically slash those Scope 2 emissions is capped by how green the national power generation is. If the country burns coal, the telecom's emissions reflect that.
That is a crucial nuance. Moving over to the social pillar, I want to look at the internal culture. The tech and telecom industries have historically struggled with inclusion, and this company is no exception if you look at the raw numbers.
The hard data in the report confirms that. The workforce is heavily male-dominated, sitting at roughly 13,700 men compared to 5,400 women.
But they are taking actionable steps to address it. They formalized a gender identity access protocol, which provides a structural framework for inclusion. They also launched a program called En Perspectiva, which brought together over 50 women in tech within the company.
Those are implemented actions, but the future commitment is what will move the needle. They have mandated aggressive diversity training for their leadership layer.
Bottom-up won't work alone.
Exactly. They understand that evolving into an agile tech co requires diverse problem-solving perspectives, and you cannot achieve that without intentionally shifting the baseline culture from the top down.
Wrapping up the ESG breakdown with governance. On the operational side, they successfully rolled out a digital platform for conflict of interest declarations, hitting 100% compliance among their management tier.
That is solid corporate hygiene.
It is. But there was another governance initiative that stood out to me as highly strategic.
You are likely referring to the integration of the investor view section into their corporate risk matrix.
Exactly. I want to spend a minute on this because it sounds like corporate jargon, but the implication is actually profound. How does adding an investor view to a risk matrix change how the company operates?
It changes everything about how they prioritize threats. Historically, sustainability reports were often siloed away from core finance. By baking an investor view into the risk matrix, they're evaluating environmental and social issues through the exact same lens an institutional investor uses to assess financial risk.
So if a severe climate event threatens the physical integrity of a coastal data center, or if a toxic, non-inclusive culture threatens their ability to recruit elite cybersecurity engineers, those aren't just HR or sustainability problems anymore.
Exactly. They are quantified and managed as core material financial risks at the board level. It forces the entire executive team to treat ESG with the exact same urgency as a currency devaluation or a regulatory decree.
I love that framework. Okay, we have covered the macroeconomic gauntlet they ran, the brilliant financial engineering required to survive it, and how they are formalizing their ESG risks. Let's look forward.
The future.
Yeah, you don't just survive a year like 2022 and then rest on your laurels.
Yeah.
What are their stated objectives and priorities for the next year?
They have outlined three core priorities, and the first one is sustaining their capital expenditures through relentless operational efficiency. Remember, they have 30 million customers relying on that network.
And as we discussed with the regulatory and inflation challenges, you can't just easily raise prices to fund new cell towers. But if the network degrades, the customers leave. It is a vicious cycle.
Precisely. The top priority is maintaining historically high investment levels to ensure network quality and expand fiber reach. Because they cannot rely on price hikes in a volatile economy, the only way to free up that capital is by doing more with less internally.
So efficiency is survival.
Efficiency isn't just a buzzword for them. It is the sole mechanism for funding their infrastructure growth.
Priority number 2 is where I think the real future of this business lies. It is accelerating the TechCo evolution. We touched on this during their B2B pivot earlier, but they are pushing aggressively beyond traditional connectivity. The days of simply providing a dial tone or a basic home internet connection are over.
It is a complete paradigm shift. They are building a full digital ecosystem. Look at their B2B division, which is now servicing 170,000 enterprises.
170,000, that's massive.
They aren't just selling them bandwidth anymore. They are selling cloud architecture, complex IoT integrations for logistics and manufacturing, and enterprise-grade cybersecurity solutions.
And their fintech arm is growing rapidly as well. They are transitioning from being the passive pipe that carries the internet to becoming the active digital brain that operates these businesses.
And to fuel that massive evolution, we arrive at priority number 3, agile financing. The company explicitly plans to continuously scout both local and international markets for tactical financing opportunities.
Makes sense.
Given everything we have discussed, this is arguably their most critical objective.
Because you can have the most visionary roadmap for cloud services and cybersecurity, but if you don't have the liquidity to hire the engineers and build the data centers, the TechCo evolution completely stalls.
Exactly.
They have to constantly secure capital regardless of what the local currency is doing.
That is the reality of operating at this scale. You are always raising capital, always optimizing, and always evolving.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, navigating some incredibly complex financial and strategic maneuvers. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If you are pulling the 3 most important insights from this deep dive, here is what they should be.
Let's hear them.
Number 1, the disconnect between operations and accounting. You can have incredibly strong, highly disciplined core operations, maintaining a 27.5% margin in the face of hyperinflation, and still take a massive paper hit. That goodwill impairment is a stark lesson in how macroeconomic country risk can completely alter a balance sheet.
Absolutely.
Number 2, constraints breed innovation. Severe economic restrictions force highly creative financial engineering. When traditional avenues for capital distribution are blocked, agile management teams figure out how to distribute value using instruments like sovereign global bonds.
It was a brilliant move.
And number 3, the traditional telecommunications business model is dead. If a telecom is only selling minutes and megabytes, they are a dinosaur waiting for the meteor. The only path forward is evolving into a multifaceted tech co offering integrated cloud, security, and fintech solutions.
Those 3 takeaways perfectly encapsulate the transformation we are witnessing. And to wrap up our analysis, if we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with an open question to mull over.
I'm intrigued.
As this company pushes deeper and deeper into cloud computing and cybersecurity to escape the gravity of their local economy, who are their real competitors now, are they still fighting traditional local telecom rivals, or are they putting themselves on a direct collision course with global tech giants?
That is a fascinating strategic question, and it completely reframes how we should look at this company's future. The battlefield isn't just local anymore.
Not at all.
Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. We always love unpacking these massive corporate shifts and exploring the mechanics of how these giants operate. Keep an eye on your feed
and we will catch you on the next deep dive.